Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S IAS Study Cell. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 19th October 2022. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start the discussion. This article on page number 1 is related to the Prime Minister's speech at the Interpol meet that is happening in Delhi. In this, he has highlighted the importance of global collaboration to counter organized crimes which are transnational in nature. In this line, if you look at the syllabus of UPSC in the General Studies paper 3, in the topic security, the linkages between organized crime and terrorism is an important topic for us from mains examination perspective. In this line, if you look at the questions that were asked in the previous years related to the linkages between organized crime and terrorism, there were two questions, that is, one was asked in this year's mains examination in 2022, and last year also a question was asked in which we had to establish the linkages between organized crime and terrorism. So if you look at this question that was asked this year, it reads, discuss the types of organized crimes and describe the linkages between terrorists and organized crime that exist at national and transnational level. In the question that was asked in 2021, it read, analyze the complexity and intensity of terrorism, its causes, linkages, and obnoxious nexus. So in this regard, in this discussion, we'll focus on understanding the basics of what is meant by organized crime, what exactly are the linkages that exist between organized crime and terrorism, and also what is the impact of such linkages between the organized crime and terrorism, and why is India so vulnerable to such organized crime because of its unique geography. Let us look at all these aspects one by one now. Now, the first thing that should come in our mind is that what exactly is meant by organized crime. And for writing answers related to organized crime, you need to know a basic definition of organized crime also. So in this regard, if you look at the organized crimes, these are a category of crimes which are transnational, national or local groupings of highly centralized enterprises which are run by criminals to engage in illegal activity, mostly for profit. Now, the best example of organized crime is the drug trafficking that takes place. If you look at India's location, it is sandwiched between Golden Triangle and Golden Crescent, which are two of the highest or two of the biggest hubs of illegal drug trade. In this, there are organized categories of businesses which are illegal in nature, which are focusing on profit making. Now, these businesses can be local, national, or transnational in nature. And that is why it is called as organized crime, because it involves a lot of members and it functions in the way in which normally businesses function. However, these businesses are functioning in case of illegal activities, and that is why they are called as organized crimes. Now, one of the example of organized crime can be money laundering. That is why the next thing that we need to understand is types of organized crimes. So the first one is the drug trafficking. Now, if you look at India's location, on the northwestern side, we have the Golden Crescent, which forms a part of Afghanistan and Iran. And on the eastern side, which is close to our northeastern states, there is Golden Triangle. And because of the existence of the Golden Crescent on the western part and Golden Triangle on the eastern part, it leads to cross-border nexus for smuggling and terrorist activities. Another form of organized crime is Hawala. Now, this is basically used as a bypass for black money to be transferred from one location to another. And that is why it is termed as an illegal organized system to transfer funds from one place to other. Now, normally this would happen through the formal economy, that is through the banking sector. However, in order to bypass the scrutiny through the formal financial system, the organized crime people use the Hawala to transfer funds from one place to other. And Hawala is one of the most organized crime related to the financial sector. And this Hawala is also closely integrated to other types of organized crimes like drug trade, terrorist activities, and terror financing also. Further, we are aware that cyber crimes are not localized in nature, and these have now become global in nature. And that is why attacks like ransomwares or malwares are working as transnationally organized activity. In this line, if you want to understand ransomware and malware, it simply means that these are those softwares which have wrong intentions. That is why the term malware, it has been derived from softwares. If you look at ransomware, it is basically installation of a foreign software in some of the computers which get logged and will be only opened after a ransom is paid to the person who is attacking or undertaking the cyber activity or cyber crime. Another type of organized crime is human trafficking. It is linked with organized crime and is considered as one of the most profitable criminal activities worldwide. Now, human trafficking channels are the channels which are used by terrorists also to make or to let enter the terrorists from other side of the border into the Indian territory. And that is why human trafficking is also one of the biggest organized crime. And along with all these crimes or associated with all these organized crimes is money laundering entities. And these bodies which indulge themselves in money laundering, what they do is that they try to enter the illegal cash that has been earned by different organized crimes into the formal system, and so that it is beyond scrutiny. So these are the 4 or 5 types of organized crimes which we should be aware while writing the answers related to organized crime. This brings us to another important thing, the location of India. If you look at location of India, on the northwestern part we have Golden Crescent, which is a part of Afghanistan, Pakistan and Iran. And in this particular area, this is known for drug trafficking. In this line, Afghanistan is one of the largest producers of opium, and the opium drug trade has been the one which has financed the Taliban's war in Afghanistan for past 20 years. So there's a clear nexus that exists between opium drug trade and the terrorist organizations that are functioning in the western part, which pose a grave security threat to India on its western borders. If you look at the eastern part, we are aware that the northeastern states which share a border with Myanmar on the eastern part, they are vulnerable to drug trafficking also because of the presence of golden. And if you look at the eastern part, where the northeastern states of India like Nagaland, Manipur, etc., they share their border with Myanmar, which is our neighboring country. Now, associated with Myanmar is the Golden Triangle, which is also one of the biggest centers of drug trafficking. And this involves a drug triangle which has been formed by few of the countries, or which involves countries like Myanmar, Thailand, Laos and Vietnam. And because of the existence of this Golden Triangle on the eastern parts, along with the borders with the northeastern states, the drug trafficking is done across the northeastern states. And this is also one of the factors which is boosting the insurgency in the northeastern states, because this drug money is being utilized by the insurgent groups. And that is why it is again a security threat. Now, what are the linkages between organized crime and terrorism? So just now we understood that how the opium trade or drug trade financed the Taliban's war in Afghanistan. In this line, there are various evidences which highlight the nexus that exists between the organized crime and the terrorism. So in 2018 annual report by the United Nations backed International Narcotics Control Board, it highlighted that India is one of the major hubs of illicit drug trade. And these drug trades prevail because of unique location of India, and these are mostly prevalent in areas which are closer to the Golden Triangle and the Golden Crescent in the western and the eastern part. Now, the biggest issue with such organized crime is that it undermines the financial security of India by generating black money, hawala transactions as well as money laundering. And the existence of large cash economy enables cross-border terrorist activities and establishment of links with the underworld, as gains can be channelized through the hawala routes. Further, Pakistan and its intelligence agency ISI has been using these established channels which are used by organized crimes for smuggling of arms, explosives which are provided to terrorists in India. In this line, a CIA report by an agency of the United States of America has confirmed the use of drug money by Pak intelligence agencies to finance militancy in Punjab and Kashmir. In this line, the Golden Triangle on the eastern part produces over 1,000 tons of opium, which is refined into high-grade heroin, and very little of it is seized in the northeastern states due to ineffective surveillance and enforcement. So if you look at the linkages that exist between organized crime and terrorism, you will find that organized crime creates or generates illegal money. This illegal money is then used for money laundering. And through money laundering, it can be used for terror financing, and that is what is key input for terrorism to survive. And terrorism also breeds organized crime. That is the unholy nexus that exists between terrorism and organized crime. And that is why both of them and the nexus that exists is a grave threat to India's national security. In this line, what exactly is the impact of linkages between organized crime and terrorism? First is that both organized crimes like money laundering, drug trade or hawala and terrorism collaborate and appropriate shared tactics by bolstering each other's capabilities. That is, they boost each other's capabilities, and that is why it becomes a far more graver threat. Secondly, it enhances their organizational infrastructure. For example, the attacks that happened in Mumbai in 1992 and 2008 used the routes which were used for smuggling, as well as same is the case of insurgency in Northeast. Further, it helps the terrorists with improved access to resources. For example, we are aware that the ISI has been using these established channels for smuggling of arms and explosives. Further, it expands their geographic reach, and also both take place in those areas which have weak political control. We are aware that Afghanistan is the one which has weak political control, and now it has come under the control of Taliban. And it has been one of the breeding grounds of terrorism, and it has been seen as a threat by India, as a threat to national security of India. So this is how we understood the type of linkages that exist between organized crimes and terrorism, the types of organized crime, what exactly is meant by the organized crime, and all these aspects. And these were the aspects which were asked by UPSC in the mains examination also. So you can try and answer the questions that have been asked in the previous years. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article on page number 6 is related to the position of governor in case of state governments. In this regard, this issue is particularly in news related to the governor's position because Kerala's governor has threatened that he can independently dismiss the ministers. And the governor has claimed that the ministers are appointed on the pleasure of the governor, and that is why the governor has the power of removing any minister in the state of Kerala. Now, there is no precedent in which the governor has removed an individual minister without consulting the chief minister of the state, because that has been the constitutional practice where if a minister has to be removed, the chief minister of the state recommends the removal of that particular minister. In this regard, we need to understand this issue in detail, which can be important for us from General Studies paper 2 point of view. In this regard, in the state of Kerala, the governor of Kerala has threatened that he can independently dismiss the ministers. So this is one issue that has come up in the news which has brought into light the functioning of the office of governor. In this case of Kerala, the governor has claimed that the statements of the individual ministers that lower the dignity of the governor's office can invite action including the withdrawal of pleasure, which means the governor can dismiss the ministers. That is what the governor is claiming, because governor is the constitutional head of the states. And that is why in this case, the governor is claiming that if the statements given by the ministers lower the dignity of the office of the governor, because the governor is the head of the state, the governor can remove or withdraw the pleasure on the basis of which the ministers are appointed, or at least the constitutional provision says so. So let us first understand what exactly is the issue here. And then we will try to understand the various provisions related to governor which are applicable in this particular case. Now the issue here is that the governor of the state of Kerala is not granting assent to the Kerala University Laws Amendments Bill. In this regard, the governor is exercising pocket veto and is not taking any decision on the bill. And this has been opposed by the Education Minister of Kerala. Now normally we are aware that in case of passage of any bill and for it to become an act, the assent of the governor is required. And in this case, the Kerala State Legislative Assembly has sent this bill related to Kerala University laws for the assent to the governor. However, the governor is not taking any decision on this particular bill. Now, normally, if the governor does not want to give assent to this bill, he can return this bill again to the Legislative Assembly for its reconsideration. However, the governor is not doing so. Now, the constitution does not define the time frame in which the governor has to return the bill for reconsideration. And that is why this is termed as pocket veto. That is, governor can sit on that bill for a very long period of time. And that is why the Education Minister of Kerala is opposing this particular move of the governor of not exercising any kind of action on this bill which has been forwarded to the governor for his assent. And this is a situation which is called as pocket veto. Another issue here is that the governor is the chancellor of the universities in the state. Now, because this particular bill, which is under controversy, is related to the universities, and that is why this confrontation is being witnessed in the case of state of Kerala, where the governor is not providing assent to this Kerala University law. However, it needs to be understood that the office of chancellor is created by statutes or laws which establish the university. And that is why the legislature of the state are equally competent to curtail the powers of the chancellors or even abolish the system of having the governor as a chancellor. So this clearly highlights that the state legislative assemblies have primacy over the governor as far as the office of chancellor is concerned, because normally the governor is the chancellor of the university. In this backdrop, the Panchy Commission, which was created to understand or recommend on the center-state relations or review the working of the center-state relations, the Panchy Commission had recommended that the governor should not be burdened with the role of chancellors of the university. So this is the issue that is presently going on in the state of Kerala. Now, in this context, the issue here is that the governor of Kerala has threatened the Minister of Education that he can remove the Minister of Education on his own. And that is one of the important controversy that has started, because there is no past precedent where a governor has removed any individual minister without the chief minister providing advice for the removal of that particular minister. So that is why it's a unique situation that has come up in the case of state of Kerala. Now, to understand what are the provisions related to the appointment of the chief minister and the council of the ministers and the removal of the council of ministers, we need to understand certain articles in the Indian constitution. And that is why it is important for us to understand the relationship that exists between the council of ministers and the governor. In this line, there are two articles, Article 163 and 164, which clearly define the relationship between the council of ministers and the governor. In Article 163, it states that there shall be a council of ministers with chief minister as the head to aid and advise the governor on the exercise of his function, except insofar as he is required to exercise his functions or any of them in his discretion. That is, normally the council of the minister, which is headed by the chief minister, will aid and advise the governor in the exercise of the functions that are provided to the governor. And there are certain situations where the governor has to act on his own or under his own discretion. That has also been clearly defined in the constitution. Now, regarding the appointment of the ministers and the chief minister, the Article 164 states that the chief minister shall be appointed by the governor, and other ministers shall be appointed by the governor on the advice of the chief minister. Now, this is a conventional practice in case of parliamentary democracy, where the head of the state appoints the prime minister or the chief minister, and on the basis of the advice of the prime minister and the chief minister, the ministers are then appointed. Further, it has been provided in the Article 164 that the minister shall hold the office during the pleasure of the governor. And this is the clause which has been invoked by the governor of Kerala, that since the ministers hold the office during the pleasure of the governor can also remove this pleasure or can also withdraw this pleasure, thereby terminating the minister. And further, the council of the ministers shall be collectively responsible to the legislative assembly of the state. In this regard, we also need to understand the way in which the council of ministers function and why there is primacy of the chief minister amongst the council of ministers. And that will help us understand how a particular minister can be removed and why this argument of the governor of the state of Kerala is not valid on the basis of constitutional precedents. Now, in this regard, the governor appoints only those persons as ministers who are recommended by the chief minister of the state. In this regard, the chief minister can ask a minister to resign or advise the governor to dismiss him in case of difference of opinion. Further, the CM presides over the meeting of the Council of the Ministers and influences its decisions. Also, the Chief Minister guides, directs, as well as controls and coordinates the activities of all the ministers. So this is clearly highlighting that Chief Minister is the one who is all powerful in case of the Council of the Ministers. And if any minister does not obey the directions given by the Chief Minister, he can be removed on the basis of Chief Minister advising the governor to dismiss that particular minister. And the governor has to do that. Further, another way in which the ministers can be removed is when the Council of the Minister itself is collapsed. That is, the Chief Minister can bring about the collapse of the Council of the Ministers by resigning from his office. Because the Chief Minister is the head of the Council of the Minister, his resignation or death automatically dissolves the Council of the Minister. And these provisions clearly highlight that the Chief Minister is the head of the Council of the Minister, and that is why he is the one who decides who will become a minister and who has to be removed from the post of the minister, and not the governor. In this context, the position of the governor is only constitutional in nature, is only symbolic in nature, because it is the Chief Minister who will decide who will become the minister and who has to be removed from the ministry. And that is why the Chief Minister advises the governor to remove a particular minister. And that is why this issue which is happening in case of Kerala is a problematic issue. However, in this case, we are understanding that the governor is saying that the statements given by the minister are lowering the dignity of the office of the governor. However, there is no such thing that has been given in the constitution on which a governor can take action. In this regard, the governor can remove the council of the ministers and impose president's rule under Article 356 under only certain conditions. And this condition is called as failure of constitutional machinery. However, the constitution does not define what exactly is meant by this failure of constitutional machinery. In this line, two articles have been provided in the constitution, Article 355, which imposes a duty on the center to ensure that the government of every state is carried on in accordance with the provisions of the constitution. And Article 356 further empowers the president to issue a proclamation if he is satisfied that a situation has arisen in which the government of the state cannot be carried out in accordance with the provision of the constitution. In this case, the president can act either on a report of the governor of the state or otherwise, that is, even without the governor's report. So this simply means that the power that the governor has is that the governor can recommend to the president to impose president's rule under Article 356. And that is only going to happen when the president has ascertained that the state government is not functioning in accordance with the provisions of the constitution and a situation is created where there is failure of constitutional machinery. So that is the situation where the governor can take such action. However, there is no clause which provides that the governor can individually remove the minister without chief minister advising the removal of that particular minister. So that is the issue that we need to understand here clearly. In this line, Supreme Court in one of its famous verdict, that is the S.R. Bommai case 1994, highlighted the cases of proper and improper imposition of president's rule or use of Article 356 to remove the state governments. Now, what are these situations where the imposition of president rule would be proper? Let us look at these situations. First situation is where after the general elections to the assembly, no party secures a majority and there is a hung assembly. And a coalition is also not being formed, and that is why this is a case of hung assembly, and in that particular scenario, the president's rule can be imposed and it would be a proper case of imposition of president's rule. Secondly, where the party having a majority in the assembly declines to form a ministry and the governor cannot find a coalition ministry commanding a majority in the assembly. So, the majority party has resigned and no coalition is being formed which can form the government or which can pass the floor test of confidence. Further, when a ministry resigns after its defeat in the assembly and no other party is willing or able to form a ministry commanding a majority in the assembly. Further, where a constitutional direction of the central government is disregarded by the state government. So this is a situation of failure of constitutional machinery where the state governments are not following the directions provided by the central government. Also, in case of internal subversion, where a government is deliberately acting against the constitution and the law, and this is a situation which can be considered as failure of constitutional machinery. And also physical breakdown where the government willfully refuses to discharge its constitutional obligations, endangering the security of the state. So these are some cases of proper application of president's rule in a state. However, Supreme Court has also identified improper cases of imposition of the president's rule or usage of Article 356. Let us look at them also. In this case, the imposition of the president's rule in a state would be improper under following situations. The first is when a ministry resigns or is dismissed on losing the majority support in the assembly. So if a floor test has been conducted in the assembly and the ministry is not able to find majority support. In that case, if a governor recommends the imposition of president's rule without probing the possibility of forming an alternative ministry, can be considered as an improper case of imposition of the governor's rule. Another case of improper imposition of the president's rule is when the governor recommends the imposition of president's rule without allowing the ministry to prove its majority on the floor of the assembly. Further, when the ruling party enjoying majority support in the assembly has suffered a massive defeat in the general elections. So this will also be a case of improper imposition of president's rule. Also, internal disturbances which are not amounting to internal subversion or physical breakdown. Also, the cases in which the maladministration in the state or allegations of corruption against any ministry or any stringent financial exigencies of the state are there, this is also not a situation where the president's rule can be imposed. So in this case, we are witnessing that there is a confrontation between the governor and the Minister of Education in case of Kerala where the governor is not providing assent and the statements given by the minister are being seen as lowering the dignity of the office of the governor. However, this is not a case in which the constitutional machinery is not functioning properly, or it is not a case in which the president's rule can be imposed. So here two things come out very clearly. First is that a minister can only be removed if the chief minister decides and advises the governor to remove that particular minister. Second is that if the governor feels that the government of the state is not functioning in accordance with the provisions of the constitution and there is a failure of constitutional machinery, that is also a case when the government of the state can be dismissed and president's rule can be imposed. And that too will happen on the basis of the report which the governor will send to the president, and then president will recommend the imposition of president's rule in that particular state. So that is why it is clear that there is no precedent where the governor on his own can remove any individual minister without the advice of chief minister. And this sets a wrong precedent in case of the functioning of the office of governor, which has not happened in the past 75 years of functioning of parliamentary democracy in case of India. With this, let's take up the next news article now. This article on page number 14 is related to International Solar Alliance. And it is in news because this International Solar Alliance has approved a funding mechanism for itself. And that is why it is an important topic for us from prelims examination perspective in the environment section. So let us look at certain key provisions related to International Solar Alliance from our preliminary examination perspective. Now, the International Solar Alliance is an alliance of 121 signatory countries. Now, most of these countries are termed as sunshine countries because they either completely or partly lie between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. The primary objective of this alliance is to work for efficient consumption of solar energy to reduce dependence on fossil fuels. In this line, it is an initiative which was launched jointly by India and France in 2015 on the sidelines of COP21 of the UNFCCC in Paris. That is, it was signed on the sidelines of the Paris Agreement, which is a very landmark agreement in terms of climate change by the UNFCCC. So in that case, it is a joint initiative of India and France. You need to be aware of this. Further, it was officially established on 6 December 2017. Another important point related to International Solar Alliance is that it is a first treaty-based international intergovernmental organization which is headquartered in India. Now, regarding the membership is open to those solar resource-rich states which lie fully or partially between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn and are the members of the United Nations. In this line, the first assembly at Delhi adopted the proposal made by India to expand the scope of membership of the International Solar Alliance to all the members of the United Nations. That is, now all the members of the UN can become a part of the International Solar Alliance, and there is no condition of a country lying between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. Although initially when it was conceptualized, that was one of the conditions. Now, regarding its objectives, so through this initiative, the countries share the collective ambition to address obstacles that stand in the way of rapid and massive scale-up of solar energy. Secondly, it aims at undertaking innovative and concerted efforts for reducing the cost of finance, cost of technology for immediate deployment of competitive solar generation. In this regard, the target that has been set by itself is to mobilize more than 1,000 billion US dollars of investment by 2030. Further, it aims at accelerating the development and deployment of over 1,000 gigawatt of solar generation capacity in the member countries. In this line, this alliance has established 5 key programs of action. First, scaling up solar applications for agriculture use. Second, affordable finance at scale. Third, scaling up solar mini grids, scaling up solar rooftops, and scaling up solar e-mobility and storage. And now regarding the funding mechanism that has been set by the International Solar Alliance, which is an important point for us from prelims examination perspective. So it aims at attracting private capital to flow into undeserved markets in Africa. Secondly, the International Solar Alliance would aim to crowdsource the investments from various donors across the globe and proposes projects in Africa would be able to purchase payment guarantees or partial insurance premium from these funds. So these are a few important points that we need to learn about the funding mechanism that has been set up by the International Solar Alliance.